From Grassroots to Greatness, we're joined by a leader who represents the next generation of American soccer leadership. Andrew Minnis, CEO of Vermont Soccer Association, brings a rare blend of NCAA, Division I playing experience, USL Academy development, club leadership, and statewide strategic vision. From Louisville City and Racing Louisville to Southern Indiana Football Club, now Vermont, Andrew has built a career around raising standards, expanding opportunity, and aligning communities behind a shared mission. His work is reshaping how state association can empower players, parents, coaches, and clubs. Andrew, welcome to the show.
Hey Bruce, I'm doing well. How are you? Thanks for having me on today.
Yes, it's a pleasure. I understand you've got some things going on this weekend. This is going to be actually in the future, but how do you think these things are going to go on the weekend?
I'm a big optimistic, so hopefully awesome. It is our largest event in the state of Vermont for youth soccer, which is really exciting. Um, it's, I think, our biggest one to date. So we've definitely done the preparation work, which is exciting around all things World Cup and youth soccer, adult soccer in the state of Vermont. So we are fully fleshed for hopefully a great weekend this weekend.
Yes, it's exciting, all the stuff that's going on around the world, actually. And soccer, as I've said for years, is going to become the sport to watch. Uh, Football used to be, but now, like I predicted 15 years ago, soccer is going to become one of the largest sports in the United States. And I believe with the World Cup coming, it's going to increase the number of viewers, number of people that are fans, etc. So tell me a little bit about your background.
Oh gosh. Well, I guess the easiest way to describe it is soccer, soccer, soccer.
Yeah.
I've been involved with soccer, I think, since I was three as a player, and I had a burst of energy that my parents needed to get out on the field to run off, and that ever
Uh,
since then it never looked back. I was a player. I played at the University of Cincinnati, had some awesome experiences in the professional environment, both domestically and abroad, which was really, really awesome. And then found my foot coaching both locally first and then at Louisville City and Racing Louisville, where I spent a number of time there as well, and slowly started to find my way of, this is something I want to do long term. And most recently, I had a ton of experiences there with them that really shaped me into kind of where I got to today, which is, taking over as the CEO of the Vermont Soccer Association, which has been such a cool experience for me in my development and just the impact and opportunity that I'm able to provide on every level across the entire state of Vermont. And as you probably are aware, Vermont has had such an incredible journey these last couple of years from, the university winning the men's national championship to Vermont Green winning, the USL2 championship to just the growth of teams and pathways and opportunities in our state. It's been just such an awesome experience to be a part of and play a role within as well.
Fantastic. Well, tell me a little bit about the association that you're
Yes.
president or CEO of.
Yeah, so we're the governing body for soccer in Vermont. We service all of our youth athletes, our clubs, our coaches, referees, pretty much any aspect of soccer that is involved in Vermont. We have our way in one way or another, from running and managing leagues to competitions to events to club resources, development, coaching, and referee education, to obviously the business side of that aspect as well. But we're an empowerment, that is how I kind of like to call it. We want to make sure that our clubs, our members can be the best versions of themselves and work directly with us to help set them up for success. And I find that to be such a cool opportunity and role within our organization and how we manage the best opportunities for players, coaches, and clubs alike to make sure that every kid or coach or adult that walks through the sport in our state, has the best possible experiences and has the best resources to get where they want to go, within their own journey.
Well, tell You probably are familiar with other states that have this type of association. Talk about that a little bit if you're able.
Yeah, we're one of the many state associations that actually service, players, coaches, and everything across the state, and the country, under the U.S. Soccer Federation, U.S. Youth Soccer, as well. And so there are many people like us, and I like to say that we're all pretty like-minded. But the unique piece about every state association is it's so different just to, the local markets and what the needs are of every state are drastically different, right? In terms of population, resources, need, even, unique in our situation, weather and climate, how we handle that. And so there's a lot of great people involved in this space across a number of states. I've grown to become really connected with all of the leaders across each of the states, and it's just super awesome to see how many people are really dedicating a lot of time to push soccer forward at I think an important time right now, and how active and proactive we're trying to be, across the various states across the country. So I've gained a lot of respect for them. I've learned a lot from those professionals, some who have been there for over 20 years, in a role,
Hmm.
and that can become a mentor of mine and have dealt with experiences maybe that I haven't, at this level. And so that I think is a huge aspect of this too, is, when you walk into a role like mine, for example, you never know what you're going to face. And I think that's an exciting part of the job, and
Hmm.
circumstances are different, but you're surrounded by a number of state leaders and smart minds within the game that I think are really, there to all of us contributing to the same goals, which is we want more players playing, we want better experiences, and we want to make sure that every person that walks through all of our doors has what they need, to go wherever they want to go.
Fantastic. Well, this is the first time I've got somebody like you on my podcast, and I think that people should be told what the difference is between associations and federations and groups like FIFA. And what do you see as the difference?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's there's a lot of discussions right now in the soccer landscape of what this should look like, particularly in our country. I think the best way that I can describe it is, obviously we're under the U.S. Soccer Federation, and we want to be the best representation, as a country that I think we can, and I think U.S. Soccer recognizes that importantly right now. And we're a key contributor as states, to that pathway, I believe, right? When you look at a pathway, or,
Hmm.
or even a pyramid, we're the foundational aspect that when someone walks through the door for the first time, we likely are the ones that they're interacting with. So if we can do a really good job from that first experience, you're gaining lifelong soccer players and fans, and things that ultimately contribute to that top end, of our national teams, or of what you're seeing at the very, very top. And so I think that relationship between us and the Federation, of U.S. Soccer is so important. And then I think just the relationship between states of how do we better work together in all of our markets to provide something that ultimately is going to continue to drive those strategic priorities that the Federation wants and sees, and how do we actually apply those general frameworks to our specific markets, right? Because Vermont looks a lot different than California, and California looks a lot different than Florida. But we're all working towards the same goal, and I think that alignment, from my perspective, is starting to become clearer now, coming from the Federation down. And so there's a lot of work that comes on, and collaboration actually that maybe people don't see, front facing. But we work very closely with the Federation to try to see what are the opportunities for us to all contribute to get this pathway aligned together for an entry player all the way up to our professionals and national team players.
And how does this relate to FIFA?
I mean, obviously, the Federation is a piece of FIFA as well, and FIFA, with us hosting the World Cup this year, has been really involved in the United States, obviously, for a number of reasons, and so we've got the experience to interact with them in a number of ways. I know some colleagues of ours in different state associations are hosting national teams, right, for training camps. We actually in Vermont have a group of fans that are coming and actually staying in Vermont and then heading to Massachusetts for the World Cup game. So we're starting to see
Hmm.
different cultures and teams and games, and just this whole thing that comes from FIFA directly, right? And how we best support that. One thing that we're doing is we're hosting, a number of what we're coining the term as Vermont Soccer Fest, but these are watch parties and really cool engagements that, from the guidance of FIFA that said, hey, here's, what we would love to see in these local communities that better serve FIFA, the Federation, and any fan that's involved across the entire world who may step foot into your environment.
Now, there's also a concept called an academy. Do you have academies in Vermont?
Um, I think that term's become kind of loose, right? Like what we used to know
Correct.
when it was the development academy, people are residential academies now. There's just this whole, different thing. I think for us, we don't necessarily have a ton of what maybe you may coin as a true academies. I think we have a number of member clubs that operate to the best of their ability as often as they can. And I think that's really unique in our landscape is when you look at our clubs and when you look at the youth soccer space in Vermont, it is very collaborative. It is very, how do we manage this environment together, which you don't really see in a number of other states. It becomes a little bit more, I don't want to say cutthroat, but, very individualized in terms of the club. And I think that's a unique aspect of the culture and the environment that you see in Vermont soccer, for example, is I think you have a ton of incredible people leading these clubs who really are in it for the kids, let's say, right? In that term loosely, but it's shown through their actions and through the items that we're all trying to implement together, where you maybe don't see that in other states. So that's a really inspiring piece from my perspective, because then as a leader and as we try to, look and manage those opportunities and what we can put in to best support our clubs, it's good to know that we all are trying to move that needle forward together, within our state.
For those of you that are watching the Andrew speak, behind him, the background is the Aurora Borealis. And coming from that area of Vermont, you have a possibility of seeing it once or twice a year in the very cold weather. So that's the Aurora Borealis, if you've never seen it before. And it's a fascinating sight to witness, just mesmerizing. Anyways, I appreciate that background. It's very informative, and I think a lot of people need to hear that kind of stuff. And it's educational for everybody. People that are just getting into the sport and people that have been there for a while that don't understand the various levels of the bureaucracy, so to speak. Well, anyways, how can young players build tactical intelligence early as far as you're concerned?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think there's a really simple answer, and then of course there's a number of complex ones. And I think the simplest answer is be a student of the game, be around the game, more often. Watch your favorite teams, watch someone who plays the same position as you from a very entry level, right? The game is the best teacher, right? And then we can apply
Mm-hmm.
that to every player. And I think that's something that maybe we don't see enough of is, when we talk to players at young ages, hey, did you watch this Premier League game? Well,
Mm-hmm.
no, I didn't, right? And it's like, hey, we used to watch these all the time. And I think the more you can learn and see people do and be able to replicate or understand why they make decisions at a young age, even at the most basic, ability of where are they taking their first touch? Look at their body positioning, as a pro. That gives us
Mm-hmm.
something to reference. So I think being a student of the game is number one. And I think the ability to be in an environment where you really can get those repetitions and experiences tactically is so important for a player's development, right? When we're talking about being on the field and getting to see those situations live, because ultimately failure means growth, right? And you have to
Mm-hmm.
have a little bit of failure and not be successful in situations as a player to be able to develop. And it gives us an ability to say, okay, why didn't this work and how do we improve? So ultimately, the next time that player comes into that experience, they have an idea of how to solve it, right? Which pushes their development. And so I think the student of the game aspect of just watching and being around soccer is great. But I think ultimately, when you're looking at young players and families who I think we could agree all have many decisions they have to make in the youth landscape now. I think it's an important piece to try to find an environment where it is in the best interest of the kid and it's going to allow them to have the opportunity to encounter those experiences, which ultimately, in the right environment, will push their development forward.
Absolutely. Now, you mentioned Premier League. There's something happening with MLS season in the near future. How is that going to change?
Yeah, so obviously MLS made the announcement that they're going to align, with the year-round model, that comes that most everybody sees internationally. So I think it changes a little bit of the timeline of what people maybe are used to, but I think ultimately the alignment sparks better opportunities, in the United States. When you look at the ability of reducing conflict, right? Because if MLS was always on a different
Hmm.
schedule than everyone else internationally, we would always run into
Hmm.
conflicts. It's going to allow for players, I believe, to be identified from different leagues or scouting networks within the United States to be able to come in and participate in MLS now because it aligns with the rest of the world and it's not another barrier for entry for international or other players that maybe would add value. But I also think for us, it's starting to show that U.S. soccer, MLS, and everybody at that level is really bought into making sure that the United States is aligned with what the best interests are and also creates something that we can be proud of and bring into our country, right? So this is a simple step maybe people see as maybe just a schedule change, but for me, I look at it as we're aligning with the world because we want to be able to compete and represent, across the world as well. And that's that kind of trickle down effect that you start to see, through these decisions that maybe the general public wouldn't start to look at, but something we think about at our levels and how we enter players into these environments, how we compete, the type of competition that's now relevant for us, I think is something people should be excited about.
Absolutely. And this will also change transfers and the ability of US as well as people around the world to come in and go out of the United States also, correct?
That is correct, right? And I think that's a simple opportunity that even we face at the state level is just how do we better align? And I think this is just an important phase of it that now opens up the secondary conversations, like you just mentioned, of now this is possible, where before it was a challenge.
True, for everybody. Well, anyways, how should parents look for what should parents look for in a club environment to ensure long-term development? Not every player, not every student, not every young athlete is going to become a professional. So talk a little bit about that, the environment.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a big believer in this, as a coach, as a leader, and certainly through, my professional development, and finding the best environment possible for the individual, right? To be able to really be specific in saying, you know, every environment's going to be different, but it's good for you to not look at all the other things involved, right? Like hey, how much did you win? How much did you lose? Where's this, where's that? I think when you look at development, I think if you can create an environment for your player to walk in that says, hey, what are my goals right now? And those goals are going to change, right? Every player's path is different, right? I may want to be a pro at 10 years old, but then when I'm 15, I just love being a part of my friend group, right? Or the opposite. And so that ultimately decision, the player and the family should drive, hey, where are we going? Rather than only hoping that, the success in the stat column, drives the decisions. And so and it's different too. I think do your research, have really good conversations with clubs, ask them, what the priorities are, what the development opportunities are, what level do you want to play at? Does it match your travel ability as a family? Right? There's are all these different pieces that if parents don't know from the start, sometimes they can be in difficult situations when it does actually occur. So, take the time to do the due diligence and find an environment that one is supportive of your player, two, your player wants to be there and wants to be around. I think that's very important is creating environments where individuals want to be there and want to come back every day, right? Because that's going to drive development. And then find an environment where the leaders within the club, really do care about your individual development, and that relationship is going to look different for every player. And then the final piece is we're all human, right? I may love winning more than someone else. I may just love being there for my friend. Find an environment that replicates those kind of values and standards that your child or your family is looking for, and whatever they may be, that's totally fine. But find an environment that best matches that, because then you're going to find a way more enjoyable experiment, a better development experience, but then also really just an overall environment where, as a family, it feels better to be a part of every single day.
Young at the age of 3, I think you said, uh, and you're still on game, but there is such thing as a burnout factor. And how does that affect where a parent should put the youth?
Yeah, I think it comes from good communication, right? I think we always want
Mm-hmm,
to look at we want to do more, we want to do more, we want to do more for our player, but sometimes
mm-hmm,
more can actually be less in
mm-hmm,
terms of what's going on. And so I think it's important to communicate between the player, the club, the family of, how are things going? Is this a lot right now? How do I manage opportunities? I think you see this solved a lot at the younger ages by multi-sport athletes, right?
mm-hmm.
Of course, I played all the multi-sports until I was about 13, and then I decided, hey, like soccer's my thing, and that was great for me. But I know another number of other kids who are probably better players than I was at that age that are still doing three sports. And so it gives them that enjoyment and that works for them. And I think that's ultimately what we're looking for is even as a pro, I've had conversations with these, players, and the number one thing is they have to still enjoy it. If it becomes too much, too much, too much, you lose the enjoyment, the fun, the belonging, the development that comes with that. If those three keys, and those are three keys that I hold very highly, is fun, belonging, and development at every age, because it looks different at every age, but the fundamental principles are still intact. And I think that helps with a burnout, in terms of preventing it, hopefully. But I think it's also a piece on the coaching side that I'm a firm believer of is environment should be player led. A player should want to drive their development. And some players want more, some players want less. But rather than saying this is what you're going to do, we try to create an environment where the player has access to it and it's not an option, right, per se. But the player wants to drive that because ultimately, if the player wants to drive it, they're more invested and they care about it. And that burnout isn't something they're being forced to do. It's a choice, which I think is an awesome thing to see when kids really start to drive their development.
The biggest gaps professionals and coaches need to close to elevate American youth soccer, in your estimation?
I think there's two things. I think one is the financial burden to provide quality experiences, right? We've seen the
Mm-hmm,
game become more expensive to do different things. And look, I understand, of course, that things cost money, right? But how are we working to solve those problems to ensure that regardless of a family or a player's circumstance, the kids get the same quality experience that they deserve, and the ones that do it. So how do we solve that problem, of course? And then two, I think is simplifying the pathway. I think I like to use the word, the alphabet soup that you like to see nowadays from
mm-hmm,
leagues and different things. How can we, and this is something we're working on with the Federation, is how do we simplify the pathway for a family? So how does a family
mm-hmm,
know that when you step on the field for the first time in your life to the last time you step on the field, whenever that may be, and whatever level, it was a
mm-hmm,
clear pathway. Here's a progression, and it's available for you, as you develop and in the right manner. But right now, I think it becomes a lot of individual marketing of here, this is better and here's why. If we can
mm-hmm,
simplify that for players, I actually think you get better groups of players in the different buckets along the pathway that ultimately
mm-hmm.
then creates better experiences. And all, by the way, localizes everything and starts to be very clear. Here's where you start, here's where you end up. And if you end up as a pro, of course, that's just part of being a pro is you got to travel, right? However, we at
Correct.
least know that you've came along this journey in a very clear manner, and this is a choice, kind of like my last point, this is a choice that you've chosen to be a part of, which ultimately drives to better results.
Absolutely. Now, if you're going to do this all over again, is there anything you'd do different? Maybe things that you wish you hadn't done and things that you wish you had done.
um I think for me, I'm in hindsight, there's always things I wish I could have taken advantage of as a player, of course, or as a coach, or experiences I wish I had earlier. What I think is important that I've come to learn, and something I share with a lot of players, is everybody's going to have their individual journey, right? And you can always look and say, hey, I should have done this more, not done this. But every experience is going to help you be able to develop and define what you do next, right? And I think that's so important for me is, maybe the opportunities I missed out on, I know next time it's going to be a great opportunity because I've learned from that, or something, it just didn't work as well as I thought it did. I know I'm
Mhm.
prepared, for that experience the next time and how to better solve that. And so I try to focus, and I tell a lot of players and coaches even, your journey, is your journey, and no two journeys are alike. And so embracing that to then further yourself is such a cool, unique experience if that's the mindset you have. There's always opportunities. There's always, things that we can do better in certain aspects, right? That's the part of the game that's so intriguing is, when you go to coach a game, both teams can play a 4-2-3-1, but both 4-2-3-1s can look very, very different, right? And still
Mhm.
get you to the same goal. And
Mhm.
so I think that's a great analysis to say, where am I at now? How do I reflect on this? What was positive? What wasn't? And then how do I best set myself up to ensure that whatever my goal or passion or desire is to go forward, I take advantage of it next time it comes around. And I think the cool part is you know this as well. The soccer world is very small. There's a ton of people, but once you're in, everyone knows everybody. And I think managing relationships is always a huge piece of it. If you
Mhm.
can do things the right way, if you can be respectful and kind, and really be a student of learning and sharing ideas, you never know who's going to come around the corner next, through that
Absolutely.
experience. And it's a cool thing to see. It's happened to me before. It's happened to a number of colleagues of mine. And so that would be my encouragement to any coach, parent, player, that is listening, is your journey is your journey, and embrace that and then learn from it as you continue to go to make sure your next step is always where you want it to be.
It's life, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yep. Yep. Well, if people wanted to contact the association you're with, what's the best way to get a hold of you and your association?
Yeah, so obviously you can visit our website. It's just vermontsoccer.org. Or my email is pretty much probably out there, but you can always feel free to contact me at andrew@vermontsoccer.org. Like I said, whether it's something to do with Vermont soccer, or I'm a big fan of just answering questions in general, being able to help, if we can use soccer for the betterment of the players, the families, and help them get where they want to go. That's our mission to do. So always happy to help if I can.
Fantastic. It's been a pleasure having you on board today and talking a little bit about a different aspect of soccer and being involved in the sport than normally people hear about. So I appreciate your time and your insights.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, and really, really appreciate it.
Likewise. Well, we're going to have to stay together, stay in touch. But
Yeah.
for my listeners, if you've been interested in this particular segment, in this episode, there's going to be others like this in the future. Uh, like, subscribe, follow, share this with everybody that you know. And we were just talking to Andrew Minnis, a leader who understands both the grassroots and the elite levels of the game. His commitment to the accessibility, alignment, and long-term development is exactly what youth soccer needs to do and needs to follow. If you're a player, a player, a parent, or a coach in Vermont or anywhere in the United States, there's a lot to take from his approach. And again, I thank you, Andrew, for sharing your insight and your journey and the future of the game. And wish you luck this weekend.
Thank you.